We'll let this thing run for about just a minute, see if anybody wants to pop in here. And then I'm going to start hitting some topics. I don't see this going an hour, maybe a half hour, depending on if anybody has questions. So let's just get started. I wanted to hit some topics. The first one I was going to hit was training, right? And then I put on my post earlier, we're going to talk about excuses and solutions. I have had 20 or 30 guys from across the country reach out and ask questions about, hey, how did you guys manage to get this done? How did you guys manage to get red dots? What were the processes you guys used to select weapons? How are you guys changing your training? And usually that ends up with us swapping out like our government email addresses, sending them basically the work we've done, saying, hey, here are our lesson plans. Here are our findings. Here are the things that some of the hurdles that we had to go through, but this is what we have so far. Feel free to use it. We always just ask, like, hey, if you're going to use like the majority of our lesson plan, just cite us in yours and go forth and conquer. A lot of those end up being like the last time you hear from somebody, which is fine. But I do hear back from a lot of guys who have taken that information to and through their chain of command asking, hey, I brought it to X. They said, yeah, that's great. Thanks for getting all the information, but it'll never happen here. And that can be very dejecting. These guys I don't even know if that's the right word. These guys get kind of crushed by that. Well, I brought it to the boss. The boss said, that's stupid. It's never going to happen here. I think that's something we hear a lot in law enforcement, the military, and I think even in private business sometimes. It's not going to happen. It's not the way we do it. They won't approve it. And generally where that frustration comes into is when you're at a specific level, you work for people, right? And I hate to break it to you, we all work for somebody, and in the end, it's their decision that is going to drive the focus of the department going forward. And there's nothing you can do about that. You can stomp your feet and quit and get angry about it, or you can guide them and try to keep helping with it. Getting mad about it isn't going to fix anything. And we're going to hit that a little bit later when we talk about use of force. The guys that get frustrated with it, you are young and in your career is beginning. These people will go away eventually. They will move on to a different position to supervise other people, and you may get lucky and get the person that's right for you and right in the end for your department, in our opinion, right? We need to get a guy in here that's going to get us red dots on pistols. That's our version of what's right for the department. Just keep that in mind. It's not what's best in the world. It's what we think is best. And it's kind of like toddlers getting our own way. We finally got our way, right? Don't let that path become something that drives you nuts either. When you reach out and we give you info, take it. Use it the best that you can. And in the end, if it won't happen at your department, it just drives that message further that I've talked about several times, where that's your problem. If you're not getting the training that you want, if you're not getting the training that you feel is effective for either your personnel as a supervisor or your mates as a line officer, then go out and seek it somewhere else. It's not against the department. It's not bad. You're not saying anything there is wrong. You're just saying, I want to improve a skill set that I know I'm lacking in, or I want to be better at, and you're going to go do it on your own. I know we didn't get paid a ton of money across the country, but there are cops that make a very good living wage. I make a very good living wage, and I choose to spend my money on training, watches, different things like that. We all have hobbies. Decide what's actually important to you and how much you're willing to invest in it. Don't demand your department gives it to you. Give them options on how that they can supply it, how they can support it if you supply it for yourself, and then how you can go about putting that training on for the rest of the department. I think it's going to be the biggest benefit you're going to find. I think most of the guys who've had success have ended up just coming in the end and going, look, here's the information we have. The testing of red dots is done. It does not need to be tested. You will not figure out anything amazing and new about it. The methods are there. The sighting system is proven. The durability is there. We would like to purchase these on our own, and with your permission, we would like to begin a T&E phase, or we'd like to begin a pilot program. Give them a timeline for the pilot program. Give them options and things that you're looking for specifically in it, different pieces of the department that will use it, officers in patrol, officers in specialty details, and detectives. They're all going to have different environments. Like a detective wants to put it in his drawer, it might get covered in pencil shavings. I don't know. But these are all things that can happen. So involve as many pieces of the department that you can. You can always find a guy who likes to train and wants to get better regardless of where they're at. There's huge differences in the way large departments work versus more compact departments, smaller ones, right? Smaller departments can be nimble as hell. They can make changes very quickly, but they're also sometimes the most resilient to change, because you're only talking about 20 or 30 guys or even less, maybe 50, 60 guys or gals, right? Don't use any of those roadblocks that you run into that seem to be challenges as an excuse not to get what you need done for yourself personally and professionally. Use those opportunities to say, hey, this is where I'm at. This is the things I'm going to keep pushing as far as training goes. And either you will end up in a position that you have the horsepower to make change, or at least advise for it, or in the end, at least you yourself will end up better. The training stuff, guys, we've got to stop as a profession about using the excuse that, well, if my department wanted me to have it, they'd give it to me, or my department won't do that for me. I don't know any doctors who take care of everything that they need is taken care of by the hospital. They seek out procedural training. They go to seminars. They learn about different things so that they can be better educated. Lawyers do the same thing. Electricians have to spend time learning about new systems when they come out. It's not just, bestowed upon you because you've gotten a degree or gotten a certification to be a cop or anything else like that. Go forth and conquer. Reach out to all the dudes that we interact with on here, and just ask them for, hey, is there a way I can get this done? What do you recommend about this? Don't be an asshole. Don't freaking seek out information and then just ignore it. At least let us know, hey, I tried that, it didn't work. Cool. Maybe we can give you some other options. There's a lot of people around here that generally just want things to be better and to help. Next topic. I think we've beaten that one up. I don't have my glasses on. I can't even read what you guys are writing, so let me check this out. I'm not going to scroll through this whole thing. Screw it, I'll just wear them. Ambushes, vehicle stuff, and things like that. My friend Mike had talked about it earlier. I'm going to give you guys my 2 cents on the whole where to invest your training time. That's kind of the way I view it. Vehicle ambushes, being ambushed in a vehicle specifically. Let's just identify what the ambush is in the very beginning. You are completely unaware that anything is going on outside of your own little world, and you are now punched in the face or being shot at or things like that. There is no baseline preparation. If your head is up and you're looking around, you see someone coming. If we're ignoring those early warning signs, and even if we just get completely oblivious to it, but we're aware of it, you still are now at an advantage. I'm talking the 100% you had no idea it was coming. A bullet comes through this window behind me and hits me in the head or hits me in the shoulder. The ability to actually react to those things is 100% just ends up being luck. You either have the drive to fight in you or you don't. If you get hit in the shoulder, let's just do a magic scenario, right? Bullet comes through my window, hits me in the shoulder. I am under no illusion that I am somehow magically going to jump up and grab my gun and turn around and start shooting out of my window, because I don't know what's out there. I am of no illusion that I'm some kind of master assassin that is going to instantly react with the utmost violence and dive out my window and get that taken care of. It's just going to be a shit show, and whatever happens is going to happen. I don't see the sense on trying to plan out dance steps when it involves an ambush other than go fight, right? And in the end, being ambushed in a car, responding to an active shooter, an alert fight, an actual assault that you see coming, in the end, those things, if they become a shooting problem, are just a shooting problem. Your skills will either support the ability to survive it and move and react to it, or they won't. A lot of those things, when I see guys training those vehicle attacks, right? Your eyes are closed, now begin, and you have to just react. You already know your environment. You already know what's going on. You know something's going to happen, but we're either firing paint or we're doing else. I don't see the value in that as a training tool. What I think those things could be done, you could probably get a little bit of value, guys, out is, hey, just at the back of your car, waiting on a high-risk stop or whatever, the suspect jumps out of the car and starts shooting at you. What time or what ability do you have to react and put rounds effectively on the given target, right? If we gave you an IPSC head box and that was it, what do you need from 20 yards to get your pistol into action and actually hit it? Are you capable of doing it? If I gave you a rifle, are you capable? How long would it actually take you to do it? And understanding what you're actually capable of can then drive your decision making on how you're going to use cover or how you're going to go about a stop. And again, that all rolls back into it's going to drive the tactics that you actually employ, your baseline hard skills. That's it. If you know what you're capable of and you've actually tested it and you've put it to work, you're going to go, I'm not capable of conducting a high-risk stop where the guy comes out and shoots at me and I'm armed with a handgun from 25 yards and putting effective fire on him with absolute accountability for my rounds. If you're honest with yourself and you can't do it, you'll realize that. If you can, you'll understand the time it takes you to do it on a stationary target, and that's really about it. But you're going to understand, hey, these are distances that I am capable of actually handling this. I know we can all get the gun going and get it fired downrange in that, but if we start taking the safety of the people that we're here to protect into consideration, and we're just sending rounds downrange into the freaking neighborhood, we're not doing our job. And we discuss this with guys at work. Sometimes or all the time, sometimes you don't get to shoot back is an answer sometimes. Sometimes you do not get to shoot back. If you're not capable of having accountability for your rounds, if you're not capable of putting where we need to go, you are not able to shoot back effectively. The training in and around vehicles, this isn't a war story time, right? I can tell you right now that the best advantages we've ever had have been from keeping people trapped in cars. It limits their mobility. It limits their ability to do anything. And no one has survived that by trying to turn violence to us. And we've won every time. I think, I don't know any other simpler way to put it. We've won every time. The idea that you're going to be trapped in a vehicle or be in a vehicle and want to fight from within it. I can see the situations where people get it. I can see the value of the training in the experience and saying, hey, I've done this before. But if it isn't really a deep dive into, is this appropriate? Is this action most beneficial to me? And am I going to, if I weigh it against all the other options, am I going to, be honest with myself about which one works the best? Until you actually get a chance to do it for real, you're not going to know. You can test each and every one of those movements, like shoot against someone else in a car who gets out and starts running, and realize how hard that is to do. If you have the access to a mover, or you have access to even just to do it on paint, and have someone jump out of a car and take off running and just try to hit him. I know paint reacts different. I know it's not a 1-to-1 from when we're firing real rounds. But I think if you see the difficulty in that, you realize how hard it will actually be for them to put it on you. And yes, luck comes into it. I'll tell you right now, with the force science studies that we've all attended the classes on, when they call it a naive shooter, the untrained naive shooter, they are, from as far as they can tell, 100% target focused, and they are just looking at what they want to hit. And if we want to get into this magical world of stats that people want to use, the majority of officers killed or the majority of officers hit are hit in the face and neck. Well, that's like saying most suicides are caused by guns. No, it's just effective. So the dead guys, yeah, you're getting shot in the head and the neck. That's why they're dead. So making stats fit what you want them to do is kind of ridiculous. A lot of those are people standing still too. This is a weird rabbit hole to go down when I'm just kind of monologuing by myself. But I want you guys to really, if you're going to train those things, ask yourself, what did I get out of this? Did I learn that I can hit IPSC alphas at, the bumper of my car from within the car? Yes, you can. How many times did I get hit doing that? And is it all luck? Realizing that we can put a car into drive and do all those other things is effective too. But the drills that we'll generally run, or we'll park the car nosed in, we'll say this isn't anything other than you guys are coming back to the car, your partner's in the passenger seat, they have to hold their phone, they're playing Angry Birds, you've got 2 big gulps in your hands, and you get into the car and the car keys are in your pocket. So you open up the door, you sit down in the car, you got 2 big gulps in your pocket, the keys in your pocket, and right then rounds start hitting the car. There's never a bad guy for them to find. There isn't one anywhere close. Their car's just taking rounds. And we ask them, what do you want to do? And in the beginning, they hunker down in the car. And I'm like, what good was that? What happened to you? And then they go, if it's hitting the right side of the car, I'm going to bounce out the other side. And we say, let's do that. So we have the MDT, we have the cage, we have all that stuff set up in the car. And then we tell them, go for it. Crawl across your partner. Bad news is he's dead. So get across get across him in the car seat or in the seat and open up the door and get out. And they realize the whole idea of it is just unassing the vehicle. Even if you think you're opening it up into gunfire, is movement, and it's the way out of the car. It's really just simplifying those principles, right? Do I want to sit in the car? No. Well, how should I get in the car? Where should I go? I don't know, but get the fuck out of the car and go somewhere. It just makes everything harder for the bad guy to deal with. Yes, your life is harder because you're moving, but you're not stuck sitting there trying to figure out, of the 18 people in the Circle K parking lot, which one's shooting at you. So let's just try to be a little more honest with our training. Let's try to actually figure out what we're getting from it. And if you go to a class like that, where you're engaging multiple targets and they're all around cars, and this one's here and your gun's getting jammed, yeah, that can induce a little bit of anger and stress because they keep fucking with your gun. But what were your actual hits on the targets, and were they effective? How many rounds missed, and where did they go? What kind of nastiness did we introduce into the environment because of our need to respond or want to respond without the actual hard skill to make it effective fire? I made a post the other day about the cars getting shot up in one of the rifle classes we did. That stuff's just going to happen in training, guys. I've shot cars. Anyone who's shot around a lot of cars has shot a car. If you do it enough and you really start thinking about it, you're like, do I want to do this junkyard prone with my gun sideways over the hood, get down in behind it? And everyone you watch do it, it takes about 6 years for them to actually shoot the gun and get a hit on the target. Or do you just want to get the gun up and put effective rounds in target immediately? Are we taking this idea of, well, I have this engine block, right? Not realizing how low in the car it sits and how far behind the axle it sits. And are we fantasizing about this idea like, well, I'm going to use cover, I'm going to use this to actually get an advantage, when the advantage is putting effective fire onto the threat and stopping it immediately? It really gets into like CQB, like, well, what's the right tactic for me to use to get into this room when this guy's got his wife and daughter hostage? What's the right tactic so I don't get hurt? I'm sorry, there's no good tactic, guys. You're going to get shot. And he's going to get shot, but he's not going to get shot, and he'll shoot him. And hopefully we can just get medical aid to everybody as it unwinds in the next, 4 seconds to well over 7 or 8 minutes. I'm telling you right now, some of that stuff can actually last a very long time. It's that unrealistic expectation of safety. That isn't our job. The safety priorities, the old priority of life, all those different things. If you take those to heart, that's going to help you put your safety in the right place and then be more aggressive with your decision making, right? Are there hostages? Rarely. Are there innocents? Pretty much all over the place. Then the suspect. So if you have innocents involved and you can go, there's innocent people here, I can't allow this guy to involve with it, and you take action to mitigate it and to stop him from hurting you or anyone else, and pretty much you should be putting everyone else, not pretty much, period. Put everybody else above you. Then you can hold yourself above him. If he's in the middle of a field with a baseball bat and no one else is around, why you would walk your silly ass out into the field to use your magic lightning gun is beyond me. That's not what's necessary. Your safety is above that of a person in crisis, right? They're having a bad day. People in crisis need to go through it. It's like a 6-year-old at Walmart having a temper tantrum. They're just going to have to go through it. So that's kind of a weird rant on that. So now we're going to jump into use of force. I'll take a real quick pause here. Has anybody got any questions on what I was talking about, or am I completely off base? I'm monologuing. Just a few, so let's jump into use of force. Use of force from my world is typically talking about law enforcement. Weighing, right, the governmental interest against a person's Fourth Amendment rights. That sounds bad, right? Whoa, the government against a person. No, the government is us. It's the people. We're weighing the needs of society over one individual's Fourth Amendment rights, okay? That isn't to say that their rights aren't valuable, that their life isn't valuable, and that we shouldn't hold it sacred and do everything in our power not to end it or hurt them even. But we have to take the totality, the completeness of our society, and put their safety for the good of everybody over the individual at times when that individual chooses to act in a way or behave in a way that is detrimental to everyone else's rights. I think that's the simplest way I can put it. There are very simple guidelines when it comes to use of force. And I think when we use that term, use of force or response to resistance, one of the problems that we run into is we view it as a law enforcement issue. So private citizens, good people that are all over this, if there's anyone watching this or you watch it later on down the road, this is for you too. If you take a concealed carry class and they give you a basic hey, these are the laws, and you take those laws to say, well, if someone breaks in my house, I'm going to shoot him. I'm going to tell you right now, that is probably the stupidest mindset that you could ever have. If they meet criteria and it's reasonable and there weren't any other options, you can weigh those things out in a half a second and decide whether or not you actually need to use that force. So this, what I'm about to talk about, applies, in my opinion, to everyone, anyone that's a citizen of this country. So I want to read this. I know it's kind of nerdy and some people get annoyed, but I want to read a use of force policy to you guys real quick. I'm going to comment on some pieces as I go, and I want you to kind of compare it to what you were taught at work, if you're a law enforcement officer, or how you view it as a citizen and what you would expect from LE, right? So I'm going to leave the name out of it until the end because I think it's going to surprise some people. But I'm going to read this because I think this is an outstanding use of force policy. I think the way it's written is exactly how we should be viewing things. And I believe personally that constitutional policing or peacekeeping is our true duty. So it is the policy of, and I'll leave it out, to value and preserve human life. People that will argue that should be in there, I think you guys you're being ridiculous. Don't ever minimize another person's life, and don't ever minimize the actions of a person. So it is the policy of this department to value and preserve human life. That's a mandatory, and I think it's a good thing to have. And then the next sentence, officers may use only the force that is objectively reasonable to effectively gain control of an incident while protecting the safety of the officer and others. Comma, still the second sentence. In keeping with the standards set forth in Graham versus Connor, it's a 1989 Supreme Court case that should drive every decision you make to use force. At least be the guideline for you, right? Officers may use force only when no reasonably effective, safe, and feasible alternative appears to exist, and may only use that level of force that a reasonable officer on the scene would use under those same or similar circumstances. That is an outstanding opening sentence. And if you guys start to educate yourselves on the law, case law, and the use of force policies around the nation, you're going to start to see how that a really well-written one can help guide decisions and make the decisions so much easier. No one's saying it's, well, I wouldn't do that at this time. Was the force reasonable? The reasonable to standard is what's in there. It's not reasonable, necessary, and proportionate. None of that is in here. It's not in any case laws that are driving what has actually been our doctrine for the past several decades. As the Supreme Court states, I'm going to keep reading to you. As the Supreme Court stated in Graham, the decision to use force, and this is a quote from the justice that wrote it, requires careful attention to the facts and circumstances of each particular case, including the severity of the crime, right, at issue, whether the suspect poses an immediate threat to the safety of the officers or others, and whether the suspect is actively resisting arrest or attempting to evade arrest by flight, right? Then they go into what the calculus of what is reasonableness. The calculus of reasonableness must embody allowance for the fact that police officers are often faced to make split-second judgments in circumstances that are tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving. About the amount of force that is necessary in a particular situation. The reasonableness of a particular use of force must be judged from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene rather than with 20/20 vision of hindsight. The question of whether the officer's actions are objectively reasonable in light of the facts and circumstances confronting them. What that's saying is it doesn't matter what the actual things were. And it doesn't matter the old adages of it. You got to articulate what you saw. You need to tell the truth about what you saw. What did you think was happening? What did you perceive was going on? And when we interview officers who've been involved in the use of force, and there's an argument across the country about, hey, I should be able to see my body cam first. I want to be able to see my body cam so I'm not wrong. Doing that, in my opinion, sets you up for disappointment. And it also sets you up to not be able to tell the story about what you actually perceived. I want to know what your truth is. I want to know what you saw and what you thought happened. And I hate to break it to you, a lot of the times it isn't what actually happened. And that's not bad. It isn't bad. Your body camera, the camera from the footage up here, and the ATM across the street are all going to tell a different story. They're going to tell a different view. I want to know what you thought happened. What did you think happened? And that is the way you have to make those decisions. I was at a conference in Connecticut a couple months ago. It was a use of force conference, and one of the guys that was up there speaking, I think he did an outstanding job. He said, my dad was a doctor. He was a medical doctor, and he has killed hundreds of people. And everybody's kind of like, Jesus. He didn't do it because of any malicious intent. He didn't do it because he was stupid. He did it because he followed the guidelines based on his training and experience that led him down a path saying, these symptoms are telling me these things are going on, and this is the fix for it. This is the best thing that I know how to do. And in the end, in some of those cases, he was either wrong, he had misdiagnosed it, or he had no opportunity to stop it from happening. It was going to happen anyway. You can't save everybody, right? You might have missed a small bleed. You might have misinterpreted blood enzymes to mean one thing, and you didn't realize it could also be this thing. But based on your training and experience, the way you viewed the world at that moment, that is what was going on. The assault was imminent. You believed this thing to be happening. If it's all true, right? I'm not getting into these weeds of, well, I think this and that, and cops plant guns and all this other stuff. That's called criminal bullshit, and those dudes should go to prison. I'm talking about the objective reasonable standards. We are not expected to divine pure and perfect knowledge of a scenario that's unfolding. What you need to do is, in those situations, as things unfold, you have to recognize, I need to use force right now. And when I need to stop using force. I need to be in control right now. And when you need to back off. There's options aplenty out there. There's lots of different ways that we can deal with people, and not all of it includes shooting them, right? There are situations where that is just the only answer that is there. And there are situations where we might be able to mitigate that by making better decisions and using better tactics. And again, our baseline skill has to support the tactic that we're trying to use. I've got another one pulled up here that I want to hit before I get into some other stuff. That one that I'm reading you guys from, it goes into deadly force, explaining when it can be used. Deadly force may not be used solely to prevent the escape of a fleeing felon. However, and it goes into basically what Tennessee versus Garner covers. Violent fleeing felon with facts known to you at the time. These are some things that you can actually do. It goes into de-escalation. I'm going to read this part to you because I think it's outstanding. And this is an umbrella policy, right? This policy explains what the use of force is for this agency. And then the subsections of it will go into how you train it, where you train it, what you define, and all these other things. So an officer will be trained in de-escalation tactics and techniques designed to gain voluntary compliance from a subject before using force. As such, tactics and techniques should be employed if objectively feasible, and they would not increase the danger to officers or others. When feasible, reducing the need for force allows the officers to secure their own safety as well as the safety of the public. De-escalation is the most misused term in law enforcement. They should have de-escalated. They should have done this. It's great. De-escalation does literally mean shooting people in the face at times. I know people aren't going to want to hear that, but that is a de-escalation. Like if you look up the actual definition, something is in crisis, something is way above the baseline of normal, and we've used any technique to get it back to normal, right? Where I think we miss the boat in law enforcement is when we're talking about de-escalation techniques, that should be one of the number one things in your head. How do I go about not avoiding it? How do I go about getting this to a controlled situation where I don't have to do anything? If the subject allows you to do it, period. If the subject allows you the time and the space, you're going to use crisis communication techniques, emotional labeling, right? Active listening, all these different things that we can do in ways that we can talk to people, including less lethal devices, containment, dogs, all of these different things that we can do. If the suspect allows us to do it, we can and should do those things. If they do not allow you to do it, you have to use whatever force is reasonable to stop them from hurting someone else or you. It's that simple. And then the reasonable stuff is all broken down in Graham. The next one that's going to be in a lot of these policies that is a requirement is the affirmative duty to render medical aid. Fuck that. He tried to kill me. No, don't let those words come out of your mouth. It's a human being who is in crisis and making stupid decisions. And if you use lethal force on them and you can save their lives, that's your job. I hate to tell it to you. If you're a cop, that is your job. All they outline in here is officers will be trained in and must recognize and act upon the affirmative duty to request or render medical aid as appropriate where needed. If it's safe to do so, you can do it. If it isn't, don't. And then it goes into breaking down training, annual training on use of force, simulated actual shooting situations and conditions, and it says it will reinforce the appropriate exercise of discretion and judgment in using less lethal and deadly force in accordance with this policy. All use of force training shall be documented. If you're not documenting it, if you're not starting your range training out as a law enforcement officer, or your agency isn't doing it with the 4 firearm safety rules, a medical plan, and then how we're going to apply this on the street, you're missing the boat. Guys, right now we're training a hard skill. If we need it, these are the situations we're going to work under. Graham versus Connor, Tennessee versus Garner, and eventually this Hill test, which is going to show us how to deal with people in crisis who haven't committed a crime. The policy that I read you guys, umbrella policy, is 4 pages long. That is the Department of Justice's use of force policy, effective May 20th, 2022. It's outstanding. How the Department of Justice has such a well-written and formed use of force policy, and then other agencies change it up and want to go extremely restrictive and vague, I think you're really doing yourself a disservice. This should be the model that most use of force policies are built on, explaining what the public expects of us, what the Constitution allows, and how we can effectively employ force and de-escalation tactics for the betterment of all, right? But still taking people's lives, and expecting or giving them the dignity they deserve. So that's that one. I wanted to read another one here real quick. Good, I'm glad you read that Hill case. Very interesting, and basically I'll hit that at the end. That's how you apply the Graham standards to a person who hasn't even committed a crime, to really get them help. Let's see, use of safe tactics. This goes into de-escalation. This is from the Department of Homeland Security's use of force policy, which is actually really, really well written as well. It references training that would come into like a later addendum, right? This is one I'm going to read you here. DHS LEOs should seek to employ tactics and techniques that effectively bring an incident under control while promoting the safety of the LEOs and the public, and that minimize the risk of unintended injury or serious property damage. DHS LEOs should also avoid intentionally and unreasonably placing themselves in a position in which they have no alternative to use deadly force. I'm going to let that one go into some notes I took from the conference. There's 2 different ways to look at this, right? Your tactics are what caused this to happen. That's never going to be correct. Your tactics can't cause something to happen. You cannot make someone do something. They have free will. Your tactics are probably sometimes not the best friggin' idea, and they didn't help anything, but they don't cause anything to happen. Well, you put yourself in that situation. Okay, but it's still that person still took the action to make an assault on you. You got too close. Well, yeah, but they still pulled a knife out and stabbed you in the neck. So again, your tactics can't cause another reaction, but if you're not seeing them ahead of time and you're not paying attention and you're not using time, space, and distance, which some people hate to hear, you're still wrong. You're using an improper tactic. When I get into this mental health stuff, and this is what I wanted to hit this part that goes very clear to that. And I like the way this was written. Don't risk the safety of officers or the subject. There is no legal duty to intervene with a subject wanting to kill themselves. But if you allow your moral duty to intervene, your tactics can be called into question. You got to understand that. If you're not forced to put yourself in a situation where you might have to use deadly force on someone to save somebody else, right? If it's just a suicidal person or a person who hasn't committed a crime, right? A person in crisis, and you put yourselves into a situation because you really want to help them, but they're not a threat to anyone else, and it becomes a lethal force engagement, your tactics will be called into question. There isn't any way around it. It's just the way the courts are looking at it now, and they're like, hey, this guy calls the suicide hotline, calls his grandmother, whoever, I'm going to kill myself. The cops used to show up, try to talk to this guy for hours, and then you force your way into the house to help him? Like, yeah, it doesn't make any sense, right? I think across the nation, we've been walking away from these things saying, I'm really sorry this guy feels this way, but we are not going to put ourselves in a situation to have to kill him for himself. It just doesn't make sense. So I'm going to hit the last thing on this de-escalation part when it comes to use of force. It's another definition that I like because I think it gives you a good, or at least it gives me a good understanding, right? De-escalation, it defines what de-escalation is. De-escalation is a tactic designed to place officers in a position of advantage while dealing with irrational, unpredictable, or suicidal persons. De-escalation helps officers stay focused and calm during crisis situations to bring chaotic moments to as peaceful a resolution as the suspect will afford. It's like poetry. I love that. De-escalation is allowing you to view the entire scene, big eyes, not hard focus until it's time to shoot, right? And you're bringing it to as peaceful a resolution as the suspect will allow it to happen. That's de-escalation. Start trying to really push that to your guys and have that understanding in your own head. Like, I'm talking to this guy because I don't want to have to mess him up. Screw this, let's get him. No, we're going to sit here and talk to him for a while. And eventually we might have to use force if he's interrupting everybody else and he's going to cause problems for other people or he's going to hurt somebody, right? My buddy's asking what circuit court the Hill case is out of. And I didn't put it in my notes, did I? Hang on a second. No, I went right into Corey Hill and Christopher Miracle. I will find that for you, or you guys can look it up. It's Corey Hill versus Christopher Miracle, all right? This is a person in crisis / non-crime, right? And I'll give you a basic on this, on what like the person on crisis is. One of the things that's starting to come through the courts is, does the subject have the capacity to understand what you're telling them to do? Right? Do they have the ability to actually understand you're giving them commands? And a lot of these use force policies that are very well written go into the fact that you should identify yourself, what your intent is, what the consequences of not listening to those intent is, and then testing to see if they have the capacity to actually understand what you're telling them to do. I have no problem with that. It sounds like, screw that, I don't have to say all that stuff, but why wouldn't you? We say drop the gun 47 times in a row because we don't know other things to say. When we can put a real easy baseline of what this situation actually is, if we use the proper terminology and we try to have a conversation with somebody. If you go up to them and say, let's make up a crime, shoplifting, I don't know. Hey, you're under arrest for shoplifting. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. Do you understand? I don't think that's too much to ask. And if they go, fuck you, I understand, I ain't putting my hands behind my back. Very well. If you don't do that, I'm going to use force on you. Or I'm going to punch you in the face, or I'm going to tase you, or whatever it is you have for a consequence. I'm going to have to hurt you, I think is my favorite one. Police don't move, and if you do that, I'm going to hurt you. It just lets them know, because I'm not saying anything other than that, I'm going to hurt you. You're just giving them a very clear outline. If you don't do this, because I told you to, because you're under arrest, which is now very clear to everyone who heard it, yeah, he told him he was under arrest, and the guy said, fuck you. Oh, and then he said, if you don't do that, I'm going to tase you. And the guy said, fuck you, tase me then. And then you tased him. I think the courts, and I'll tell you, and there are some cases where the courts have looked at it like, well, you just gave him consent to tase you. Well, I didn't think they would do it. Well, what did they say? Well, he said if I didn't turn around, he'd tase me. And then what? Well, he tased me. Shit, sounds like consent to me. Those phraseologies, that use of language with a person when you're very calm and you make it very clear, paints a picture for your body cam. It paints a picture for the witnesses watching. It paints a picture for the security cameras in the store where everybody kind of understands what's going on. You're under arrest. And if they're not, then you probably ought to find a different route to deal with these people, right? If they're not under arrest and someone says, I want to talk to you, you need to let them go. Like, I don't get that one. Hey, what's your name? Fuck you, I don't want to talk to you. Come here. Well, now you've seized them under the Fourth Amendment and you don't even know how to navigate your way out of that without bullshitting with, I can do this and I'm going to big dick you because I'm a cop. You better understand what's expected of you and how you can deal with it before you go ordering people around and actually seizing them. But right now we're talking about you're under arrest. You're under arrest. Turn around, put your hands behind your back. Do you understand? I don't think it's too much more to ask. I think it's really simple. It makes it clear. And if the guy's talking to space aliens and you say that and he just keeps talking to space aliens, maybe he doesn't understand what you're saying. If he's half passed out because he's drunk and he's mumbling and you're saying, do this and do that, he can't actually understand you and you can recognize that. There's other ways to deal with it. If you put somebody on the ground and they start struggling like crazy, and I'm not trying to divine intent, are they struggling from oxygen deficiency or are they struggling to try to fight you? Have you fought enough people and had enough people resist you to actually get a feel for a guy who's just panicking or a guy who's trying to cause you physical harm? There's a difference, right? The Hill test, I'm going to hit it with you guys real quick, and I think I'll end this. I'll see if there's any questions. Corey Hill versus Christopher Miracle. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. I'm just wandering around. Corey Hill versus Christopher Miracle. Mr. Hill was a diabetic. EMT show up, cops show up because he's an EMT. He's like, I'll help. He is fighting like crazy. He's in a diabetic emergency. They prick his finger, his blood sugar's super low. They're trying to start an IV or give him medication, and he is thrashing all over the place. He asks, what do you want me to do? They're like, try to hold him still. They can't hold the guy still, and he ends up drive stunning the guy in the leg, which gets him to stop fighting long enough that they can actually get this guy life-saving medication, and they save his life. He's happy as hell. He's like, great. Eventually down the road, he ended up dying, which is absolutely terrible. And then the family ends up suing the department, saying they used excessive force, this shouldn't have happened. And it ended up going through where they were saying, well, we're going to apply the Graham standard to this. But if we look at the Graham standard, we're already missing two things, right? Severity of the crime, there is no crime, right? Was the subject trying to resist arrest? Well, he's not under arrest. So there's the two parts of the three pillars of Graham. We're missing two already. So they, excuse me, Supreme Court said you're basically saying you're putting the law enforcement officer into the batter's box down two strikes. He's only got one left. And it's not the way we want to do business. The guy hasn't committed a crime. So they came up with what's called the Hill test. And this is for persons in crisis or persons incapacitated due to illness or intoxication, right? The Hill test is, was the person experiencing a medical emergency that rendered him or her incapable of making rational decisions under the circumstances that pose an immediate risk to himself or others, right? Are they having a medical condition or intoxicated to the point where they are not capable of making rational decisions, at least as far as what we generally view as society? Are they capable of making rational decisions, and are they going to hurt themselves or cause someone else to get hurt? Check. Yes or no, right? Was some degree of force reasonably necessary to ameliorate the immediate threat? Is it reasonable that we should use some force to stop this person from dying or hurting themselves or running into traffic or causing harm to someone else? If so, yes. Was the force used more than reasonably necessary under those circumstances at the time in that very specific event, not the one yesterday or anything else? Was it reasonable to use that force in that very specific event? If the answers are yes, yes, and no, then you've passed the Hill test. And you're basically going, hey, it is reasonable. If a 400-pound, 6'5" male is completely drunk out of his mind, he starts running out into the roadway, is tackling him and stopping him from running the roadway reasonable? Yes. Is that something he would probably do if he was sober or not on drugs or not having a medical issue? Probably not. If an 8-year-old kid is screaming and yelling at their mom and having an absolute panic attack, is grabbing them and throwing them on the ground reasonable? Probably not, right? So use that reasonable standard whatever you do. Understand the Hill test when it comes to applying it to persons in crisis, also people with medical conditions or intoxication. And with those intoxication and medical condition issues, start to test for that capacity. Ask them, do you understand what I'm telling you? If it's clearly not a two-way conversation, they may not have the capacity to understand what you want them to do. There might be a language barrier. There's all kinds of other things that can go there. But if you get that they have the capacity and you're covering yourself under Hill or you're covering yourself under Graham, use the force that's reasonable to stop them from hurting themselves or others. I think that's the simplest way to break it down. I think I had a few other things that I wanted to hit. If there's anybody in here with a question or if you disagree completely and you want to jump on, let me know. I'm right at about 44 minutes, which is longer than I thought I would go. I'm going to scroll through some of these. Armstrong, Chad put in here, Armstrong versus Village of Pinehurst really hammered the use of taser in the Fourth Circuit. I want to say that we discussed that one in the Use of Force Summit. My notes are very long and I don't have that one tabbed. I will look that one up and educate myself better on it, but I want to say that was that multiple tasings if you're still in here? Yeah, I don't know if he's in here or not. Chad 2A Hayes. All right. Yes, it was multiple tasings. Okay, yeah. That is going to become part of a lot of force policies. Labeling it as a less lethal, not a less than lethal, right? Happened a while back. That just goes down to good sound tactics, right? And is what I'm doing right now working? And if it's not, why am I still doing it? Find something else to do, right? That's like the definition of insanity. A lot of people say it's doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. No, the definition of insanity for me is doing the same thing over and over again, knowing exactly what the fuck is going to happen. That's insanity, right? Tasing this guy, put your hands behind your back, screaming and yelling at people, losing our cool, losing our ability to actually control ourselves and our emotions. That's where we lose it. I'll educate myself a little bit better on that one, so I have a clear understanding if you ask me about it or someone asks me about it again. One thing I want to hit as far as policy goes, I know some of the guys are going to hit me on this. So the multiple tasings on a non-assaultive subject who is under involuntary commitment order. That's the one where you need to look at the Hill test, right? Are we doing this to actually help this person? Are we doing this because they aren't doing it away and we're incapable of getting it done another way? And I want to say they got their ass kicked on that one. We're going to beat your ass to help you. I don't think that one's ever made sense, right? That's about as far as we'll go into that one. As far as use of force policies go, they're going to differ across the country because you have local laws that are going to change the way that they're affected. They're going to change just based on climate. You're going to have different use of force policies because some things don't work in other regions that do in others. It's no different than breaching, right? Stuff that works in the Northeast is way hot for stuff that's super dry. Your use of force policies that you guys are guided by, you need to understand them. You need to understand where they draw their authority from and what actually empowers you to make those decisions, right? You can have use of force policies that are more strict than what the Constitution allows and what case law allows, but they're still going to be based on the U.S. Constitution, case law, federal law, state law, local laws, policies, training, and supervision, right? In the end, it doesn't really matter what your policies are. You've got to understand them. You have to understand how to employ them effectively, and you have to be confident in the decisions you're going to make. If at any time you don't understand them, it is your job as a professional to ask the questions about how can I go about doing this? What you cannot do is bitch and say that it's stupid. Don't say this is dumb and I don't fucking like it. Tell them, I have a concern about this, and these are things I would like to have addressed. I would like some guidance on this, right? You can put together an outstanding policy. That policy then needs to drive the training that you give to our people, right? And then the supervision needs to understand that training. So the training, the supervision, right? All of those things go together with policy. And you're not going to like this, some of you, it is the supervisor's job to hold you accountable when you screw up. And you need to not take that like a 6-year-old. When you make a mistake or you have a lapse of judgment and you didn't know what to do and it came out not the way you wanted it to do, welcome to police work. It does not always come out the way we want it to. When it goes that way and you've done something that's outside of your policy or you do something that isn't the best, take that coaching or take that education as what is good for you, because that's what is wanted, I hope. I don't know where most of you guys work. I hope that you don't have malicious supervision. I hope you have leadership that actually tries to better you. And you can take that slap on your pee-pee and go, well, I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to learn from that and I'll do it this way. Because I can tell you, when I was brand new, I had a really cool sergeant. And he pulled me to the side and he said, what did I tell you about chasing cars, Chris? And I was like, you told me not to chase them. He's like, all right, because I just got done chasing another car. We want to catch bad guys. That's what we want to do. We want to catch bad guys. I'm not out there to fuck with the general public. They're just trying to get to work and feed their family. But the predators, the violent scumbags that are out there in the world, that's who we want to catch. But if you don't know how to deal with them and you don't know how to handle your own emotions when you're dealing with them, and you don't clearly understand what A, you're capable of doing, and B, that you're actually allowed to do it, you're just going to damage yourself in the long run. And you're going to make poor decisions. You're going to not make decisions, and you're going to fall behind the curve. And hopefully you don't get someone else hurt. I think that's all I got for today. I'll save this. I'll post it. If you guys watch this, it ended up going a little longer than I wanted to, but feel free to put in the comments. Feel free to message me, tell me I'm stupid. That's fine. And I'm willing to discuss it with anybody that wants to. Be well.